It arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in brown parchment and sealed with wax. No return address. Just her name written in a neat, slanted hand. Fiona Thorne. Fiona almost tossed it aside, assuming it was one of those Gothic-themed wedding invitations her artist friends often sent. But the weight of the envelope, heavier than expected, made her pause. She cracked the seal, unfolded the parchment, and found only one line. The house remembers. Come to Ashbourne before the equinox. There was no signature, no context, but her breath caught. Ashbourne. She hadn't heard that name since she was a child. A place her mother swore never existed. A place Fiona once dreamed about in vivid detail, an estate on a hill, covered in fog, with a door that whispered her name. She read the letter again. Then again. Her fingers trembled. By nightfall, she had packed a single bag and booked a ticket to Maine. The train station in Camden smelled of pine and salt. Fiona stepped onto the platform with a suitcase, a heavy coat, and a head full of questions. The fall wind bit through her scarf. The sky was a steel gray, low and pressing. A man stood at the edge of the platform holding a sign that read, F. Thorne. He wore a newsboy cap and a wool coat far too thin for the weather. His expression was unreadable. You're here, he said simply. Who sent you? Fiona asked. The house, he said, then turned and walked. She followed. The drive was long, winding through pines and past forgotten farms. Finally, the road narrowed to a gravel path. At the top of a hill, Ashbourne awaited. The manor was vast. Georgian stone and broken chimneys. Ivy clung to every surface. Windows stared like blind eyes. Yet something about it felt alive. The driver stopped but didn't get out. Inside. Second floor. West wing. He said. She left it for you. Who? But he was already reversing. Fiona approached the house slowly. The gate creaked open with a reluctant groan. Each step toward the front door felt like a return, not an arrival. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust covered everything, but the air was warm as if someone had recently lit a fire. A single candle burned on a table in the foyer. And beside it, another note, Your memories are buried here. Follow them. That night, Fiona dreamt of a red hallway, a piano playing itself, and a voice whispering from behind a mirror. You left us, but the house never forgets. She awoke with the name Lillian on her lips and a trail of footprints leading down the corridor, though she'd locked her door. The sun rose through veils of fog, illuminating Ashbourne's stained glass windows with sickly light. Fiona stood at the threshold of the west wing, hand resting on the ornate doorknob. Her breath caught in her throat. Behind this door, she sensed not just rooms but something waiting. She turned the knob. The hall beyond was long, lined with oil portraits so faded their faces were little more than suggestions. One, however, caught her attention. A woman with a stern mouth, high collar, and hauntingly familiar eyes. À bras plaques. Lillian Ashbourne, 1879, 1914. Fiona's knees weakened. The name she had spoken in her dream, the name that had clung to her tongue upon waking. Was Lillian her ancestor? A ghost? Further down the corridor, she passed closed doors, each bearing carved symbols. One had a harp. Another, a key. Another, an eye. Finally, at the end of the hall, a door slightly ajar. She pushed it open. A study, lined wall to wall with bookshelves, and in the center, a single desk. Upon it, a crystal inkwell, a feather pen, and a leather-bound journal. Next to the journal, a locket. Fiona picked it up. Inside, 2 photographs. A child in a bonnet, and the same woman from the hallway portrait. The journal cover read, To the one who returns. She opened it. I am Lillian Ashbourne. And if you are reading this, you are kin. Perhaps my granddaughter. Perhaps beyond. This house. This place is our curse. And our keeper. The house remembers everything. Every secret, every betrayal. It remembers what was stolen from it and what it still guards. Fiona turned the page. Her hands trembled. Do not trust the silence. It listens, and it will show you what it wants, but only if you are brave enough to look. A sudden sound footsteps outside the room. Fiona snapped the journal shut. Turned. The corridor was empty. But a shadow lingered at the far end. Just beyond the painting of Lillian. And then the candlelight flickered. The air turned cold. Fiona stepped into the hall, gripping the locket. Somewhere, deep within Ashbourne, a piano began to play. The same tune from her dream. And the whisper returned. She never left. She's still waiting. Fiona walked toward the sound, heart pounding. The house had begun to remember. And now, so would she. The piano music led Fiona to a room she hadn't noticed before, its door slightly ajar, though she could have sworn it was sealed the night before. It creaked open at her touch, revealing a dusty parlor with walls the color of dried blood. The piano stood at the center, its keys depressed in rhythm. Yet no one sat before it. Fiona froze. The melody stopped abruptly. Then silence. She took a cautious step forward. A cold breeze passed over her shoulder like someone exhaling. She turned. Nothing. But her reflection in the antique mirror on the wall didn't move with her. It lingered, watching. She backed away slowly until she was out of the room and slammed the door shut. The echo traveled through the house like a warning. That afternoon, Fiona tried to find rational explanations. Maybe the breeze was a draft. Maybe the music was a warped phonograph somewhere in the walls. Maybe stress and lack of sleep were playing tricks on her. But she knew better. She'd known from the moment she stepped into Ashbourne that this house wasn't empty. She returned to the study. The journal still lay where she left it. But when she flipped the pages, new entries had appeared written in the same antique script. The house tests your memory. If you forget, it will remind you. If you deny it, it will show you. Below that, a line in darker ink. Follow the scent of lilacs. Fiona frowned. Lilacs. She remembered a perfume worn by her mother. Perhaps. She stood, sniffed the air, and caught the faintest trace. She followed it through the corridor, down the main stairwell, into what must have once been a ballroom. The chandeliers above were caked in cobwebs. The walls bore scratches, not vandalism, but desperate marks, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. At the far end of the ballroom stood a door with iron hinges. It pulsed, slightly as if it breathed. Fiona reached out. Before her fingers touched it, the door cracked open of its own accord. Beyond was darkness. She stepped through. The smell of lilacs intensified, along with something else, decay. The hallway was narrow. The wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. Family portraits lined the walls, but every face was scratched out. Deliberately, she reached the end of the hallway. Another door. This one was locked, but next to it hung a key on a chain, rusted and old. She took it. As the key slid into the lock, a voice whispered behind her. Don't let it see you. Fiona spun around. Nothing. She turned the key. The door creaked open to reveal a nursery. Dust-covered toys lay scattered across the floor. A cradle rocked slowly. And on the wall, a child's drawing done in red crayon. It showed a woman standing beside a house, hand in hand with a little girl. The woman's face was smiling. The child's had no face at all. Fiona stepped closer to the cradle. Inside lay a doll with glass eyes and stitched lips. Around its neck, a locket identical to the one Fiona had found in the study. She reached for it. The door slammed shut behind her. The room darkened. The cradle began to rock violently. The music box on the shelf started playing same melody as the piano. And then, in the far corner, something moved. A silhouette, small, watching. Lillian, Fiona whispered. The figure didn't answer. But the rocking stopped. The music ceased. And a child's voice, very close, whispered, She's still in the mirror. Fiona turned slowly toward the tall mirror in the corner. It was fogged, but a handprint formed on the glass from the inside. She ran. Back in the study, Fiona slammed the door and locked it. Her breath came in sharp gasps. The journal on the desk had turned to another page. You saw her, now she sees you. She will follow, until you remember. The cellar holds the first memory. Fiona stared at the writing. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Ashbourne didn't want her to leave. Not yet. And neither did Lillian. The house was leading her somewhere and memory was the price of admission. She knew now. This wasn't about ghosts. It was about truth. And the house would reveal it all. No matter the cost. The cellar door groaned as Fiona forced it open, hinges stiff with disuse and time. A wave of damp air met her, tinged with mildew and something older like wet stone and forgotten breath. She held her flashlight tight and descended the creaking steps into the darkness. Each step downward felt like slipping into another time. The wood gave slightly beneath her weight, and cobwebs caught at her coat sleeves and hair. When her foot finally touched the stone floor below, she paused, letting her eyes adjust. The beam of her flashlight caught on something glinting. A mirror, tall, oval, and framed in tarnished silver. It leaned against the wall, untouched by dust, though everything else was coated in thick layers of it. Its surface shimmered faintly, though Fiona's reflection refused to fully form. She stepped closer, hesitant. The journal had said the first memory was here. The house tests your memory. So what did it want her to remember? As she stared into the mirror, her flashlight flickered. And then, the reflection changed. She was no longer alone. In the mirror, behind her, stood a young woman in a black morning dress, her face pale and solemn, eyes hollow. Fiona spun around nothing. But when she turned back to the glass, the woman remained. Lillian? She whispered. The woman in the mirror blinked, and the mirror cracked. A hairline fracture from top to bottom, like the house exhaling under its own weight. The floor beneath Fiona groaned, and a section gave way. She fell. She landed hard on damp earth, breath knocked from her lungs. The beam from her flashlight spun wildly before clattering out of reach. For a moment, all was black. Then a dim light began to glow from a bovino, from the walls themselves. Faint, phosphorescent moss clung to the stone. Fiona rose slowly. Her ankle ached, but she could walk. The chamber she had fallen into was circular. Carvings lined the wall symbols she didn't recognize. But that stirred something deep in her memory. At the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and atop it, a locked wooden box. A name was etched into the surface. Lillian. Fiona reached for the box. As her fingers brushed the wood, images exploded in her mind. Not dreams. Memories. A girl herself, younger standing at Ashbourne's gates. A woman with auburn hair calling her Ellie. A room with lilac, scented curtains. A hand over her mouth. Darkness. Then silence. Fiona staggered back, heart racing. She wasn't just descended from Ashbourne. She had been here before. She had lived here. Something had made her forget. She stepped closer to the box again. It pulsed faintly under her hand, as though alive. Then she heard footsteps above. She looked up, expecting nothing. But a voice echoed from the hole she'd fallen through. You shouldn't have come back. A woman's voice. Cold, familiar. She waited. Silence. When she looked down again, the box was open. Inside lay a photograph, sepia-toned. A family portrait, her mother. A man her father. And in front of them, a child. Herself, wearing the same locket that now hung from her neck. The journal had said, she never left, but Fiona had. And now the house wanted her to remember why. She placed the photo in her coat and turned toward a narrow tunnel she hadn't noticed before. It led deeper underground, deeper into memory. With no other path, she entered. The walls whispered her name. Not Fiona. Ellie. The name she had forgotten. The name they tried to bury. The tunnel opened into a vaulted chamber. 6 doors lined the circular wall. Above each, a different symboli. Flame, tree, clock, serpent, and mirror. The mirror door pulsed. Fiona approached it, trembling. The doorknob was cold. She opened it and stepped into the past. The room beyond the mirror door shimmered with twilight, though no windows existed. The walls were lined with velvet drapes, faded but once royal blue, and the floor creaked beneath a thick layer of dust. Fiona stepped in carefully, half expecting to be pulled into the glass again, but nothing moved. The door sealed behind her with a whisper. At the center of the room stood a massive cheval mirror, taller than any she'd ever seen. Unlike the cracked one in the cellar, this glass was pristine. The frame was carved with symbols the same 6 she'd seen in the tunnel. Eye, flame, tree, clock, serpent, and mirror. Fiona approached slowly. As she looked in, her reflection shifted. She saw herself as a child, no older than 6. Braided hair, a white ribbon tied at the collar. In her tiny hands, the same locket. But her eyes, they weren't Fiona's. They were Ellie's. In the reflection, the little girl turned to look directly at her. And spoke. They said I was too young to remember. But I never forgot. Fiona stepped back. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. I don't understand, she whispered. The child in the mirror blinked, then changed. A new image formed. A dining room. Candlelit. Her mother, younger. Her father stern, silent. Lillian, seated at the head of the table. Fiona Ellie sat to her side, coloring quietly. She's gifted, Lillian said, sipping wine. She sees what others don't. We must keep her close. She's just a child, her mother replied, a hint of panic in her voice. We need to go back. This house isn't good for her. Lillian leaned forward. She belongs to Ashbourne, and Ashbourne remembers its own. The candle flames flickered. Then the scene changed again. A locked room. Ellie pounding on the door, screaming, crying. Let me out. Outside the room, a voice her mother spleeting. I'm sorry, I didn't know they'd please, just let her go. A cold male voice answered. She saw too much. The reflection darkened. Fiona stumbled backward, hands trembling. The mirror now showed only her adult reflection, wide-eyed and afraid. Then a final image appeared. The study, the journal open. Fiona standing there, older, confused. Behind her, Lillian, smiling. A voice, no longer inside the mirror, but all around her. You came back to finish what they started. You came back to remember who you were before they took your name. Fiona gritted her teeth. I'm not afraid of you, she said aloud, not knowing who she addressed Lillian, the house, or the past itself. The mirror flickered. Words formed across the glass in white condensation. Only the serpent door reveals the truth. The velvet curtains parted with an invisible breath. Another door was revealed wooden, with a brass serpent twisted around its knob. Fiona turned the handle and stepped through. The room beyond was unlike any she'd seen. It wasn't dusty or decayed. It looked lived in. A child's room. Bookshelves filled with picture books. A small bed. Stuffed animals arranged in neat rows. On the desk a diary. Fiona picked it up. The name written on the cover chilled her. Eleanor Thorne. Ellie. Her true name. She opened the diary. Today, they told me I'm not allowed in the Blue Wing anymore. I saw Uncle Victor talking to Grandmother in the mirror room. They stopped when they saw me. They said I'm too curious. But I saw her hands. They were bleeding. Mama wants to leave. But she said Grandmother won't let us. I don't want Mama to cry anymore. I miss home. Page after page, the same themes emerged. Secrets. Fear. A girl who knew too much and a family trying to silence her. Then one final entry, hastily scrawled. They said I'm going to a special place. But Mama screamed. I think they're lying. I buried the key in the garden. If someone finds this, please find me too. My name is Eleanor. Don't let them make me forget. Fiona clutched the diary to her chest. She hadn't just lived at Ashbourne. She had been imprisoned here, her identity erased, her memories buried. But now she was remembering. And she knew what she had to do. Leave the mirror, find the garden, unearth the key, and finally, open the truth. Behind her, the mirror door creaked shut on its own. But Fiona didn't look back. She was ready to face whatever came next. Because now she knew who she was. And Ashbourne would have to face her too. Rain had begun to fall by the time Fiona stepped outside. The overgrown hedges of Ashbourne's once grand estate glistened under the drizzle, casting a silvery sheen over the cracked marble pathways. She moved quickly, guided by instinct and the memory of a child who once buried the truth beneath the earth. The garden had changed. Statues leaned at odd angles, vines choking their once delicate features. The central fountain had dried up, its basin filled with dead leaves and the skeletal remains of birds. Fiona scanned the hedgerows until she found the Placia rosebush, twisted and half dead, but unmistakable. Her child's hands had once dug here. She fell to her knees, fingers scraping at the soil. The ground was cold and reluctant, but she kept digging, breath catching in her throat. Minutes passed. Then her fingers struck metal, a small tin box. She pulled it out, heart pounding. The lid creaked open, revealing a tiny brass key wrapped in an oilcloth. Beneath it, a faded photo. Her mother-ese fearful, holding her close. On the back, a note in delicate script. For Eleanor, if you find this, remember Ashbourne cannot own you. Love, Mama. Tears blurred her vision. The house hadn't just taken her name. It had taken her mother. Back inside. Fiona wasted no time. She went to the study, past the fireplace, to the old built-in cabinet she had always assumed was nailed shut. But there at its base was a small, hidden keyhole. She slid the brass key in. The mechanism clicked. The panel swung open. A staircase descended behind it, narrow, spiraling downward. Another secret. The descent was slow. The air was damp and thick, and the deeper she went, the more certain she became this was where they had brought her. This was the place they called special. The stairs ended in a stone corridor. Sconces lined the walls, though long extinguished. The floor sloped downward into an arched chamber. And inside, cages. 4 of them. Empty now. But not abandoned. Chains still dangled. One cot had a doll. Another, scratch marks on the wall. Names were etched above each cell door. One of them, Eleanor Thorne. Fiona felt bile rise in her throat. This wasn't a boarding school. It was a prison for children like her. The gifted. The ones who remembered too much. She explored deeper. In a chamber beyond, she found file-sold, yellowing paper, medical charts, test results, all bearing her name. They had studied her. Lillian's handwriting filled the margins. Subject responds to memory prompts. Resistant to suggestion. Intelligence unusually high. Must keep separate from other children. Risk of exposure. One file was marked Final Entry. Eleanor to be sedated. Transfer failed. Mother attempted escape. Contain and remove. The page below was a report of a death. Her mother's. Fiona dropped the papers. Her knees buckled. She had thought her mother fled. Survived. But they had killed her. To keep the truth hidden. Somewhere above, the house groaned. She climbed back to the study, fury and grief warping her breath. She tore open drawers, flung back rugs, yanked paintings from the walls until behind one, she found a safe. The brass serpent again. She placed her palm against it. It clicked open. Inside Lillian's final journal. Not the one she had found in the study. This was bound in red leather. Her crest embossed in gold. She opened it. The first entry chilled her. I had to do it. Eleanor remembered too much. Her mother was weak. If I am to preserve Ashbourne, the girl must forget. The house has already chosen her. But blood always remembers, and she will return. If she does, the mirror must be sealed again. Fiona snapped the book shut. The mirror was no prison. It was a barrier. To truth. and she was going to tear it down. The storm outside had become a downpour. Thunder shook the house as she descended into the ballroom. The mirror from the cellar had been moved now, mounted against the far wall, surrounded by symbols. Lillian waited beside it. Or what remained of her. A shadow in the shape of a woman. Eyes too bright. Smile too wide. "Eleanor," the shade whispered. "You were never supposed to remember." "I'm not Eleanor anymore," Fiona said. "I'm the one who came back. You cannot destroy Ashburn." "No," she said, stepping forward, "but I can end your hold on it." She opened the red journal and began reading aloud. Lillian screamed. The mirror cracked. Lightning flashed. The walls shuddered as the symbols around the mirror burned with golden fire. Fiona's voice grew louder, reading each confession, each cruel truth. The mirror exploded, and the shadow vanished. In the silence that followed, the house was still, truly still. Fiona walked through each room the next morning, the sun warm on her skin. The gloom had lifted. The weight was gone. Ashbourne was just a house again, but she was not the girl who had come here. She stood in the garden, the tin box still in her coat, and whispered her final goodbye. "Thank you, Mama." Then she turned and walked down the path, back into the world. Free. At last, Fiona returned weeks later. Not to reclaim, not to remember, but to decide. Ashbourne stood silent beneath a cloudy sky. The vines had not yet given up their hold, and the statues still slouched like weary guardians. But something had changed. The house no longer watched. It no longer breathed. She had come alone, a letter in her coat pocket and a deed in her name. The solicitor had asked no questions. After all, Ashbourne had been in limbo since the last heir Lillian had vanished from record. Inside, the dust had begun to settle. The shattered mirror had been removed. The ballroom swept. Light poured through the broken storm windows, catching on motes that danced like old spirits finding rest. Fiona walked from room to room, touching the edges of each memory. The nursery. The mirror door. The study. The hidden stair. But it was in the garden where she sat to read the letter one last time. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then you remembered. That means the house failed to erase you, and I could not be more proud. I did everything I could to protect you. I bargained, I threatened, I begged. In the end, all I could do was hide a piece of myself for you to find. I know it wasn't enough, but it was all I had left. Ashbourne is a wound, a living one, and it fed on the pain we left buried, but you stopped it. You reminded it of what we were before the rot. If you choose to walk away, no one will blame you, not even the ghosts. But if you stay, rebuild it might become something else, something better. Just know I always believed in you. Love, always, your mother, Maeve." Fiona folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it beside the rosebush where the tin box had once been buried. The key was gone. The door had opened. The past had spoken. She stood, brushed dirt from her jeans, and walked back to the house. A year later, Ashbourne was transformed. Gone were the cages, the dark archives, and the locked doors. In their place, bookshelves, children's laughter, a garden in bloom. Fiona had turned the estate into a refugee for those with memory. With gifts, with voices others feared. They called it Thornhouse now. And when newcomers asked who Eleanor was, Fiona would smile and say, she was someone who forgot, then remembered. And then helped the house remember too. Late one night, as a soft summer rain returned, Fiona stood at the top window overlooking the grounds. The moon cast silver on the grass, and the roses had opened fully. Even under the drizzle, she touched the locket still around her neck. It no longer burned. Behind her, the mirror in the hallway showed only her own reflection. No flickers, no shadows. Ashbourne had learned. So had she. And from the ashes, something new had grown. Something with roots. Something that would remember but never repeat.